was aware of what was on top of the hill, watching them. Gray Owl stretched out on the ground behind two large cedars, studied the homestead, which stood 50 yards below him. He knew from 2 previous days of watching that the man and the boy would come out on the porch before the sun set behind the hills. The older man would light a pipe, and both would sit on the steps of the porch. He would be able to hear their voices, but did not understand the words being said. He didn't need to. He knew the man would be looking at the sunset and telling stories to his son, just as Gray Owl's father had told him so many times in the past. Those were the good times, and he longed for them. It seemed a long time ago, but actually had been only 5 or 6 winters. It was before the white man had descended on this land like a great flood, changing everything for the Apache. He glanced behind him, where the men who were with him waited his signal to attack. He looked back to the white man's house, just as the old man came out, and, as previous nights, sat down on the porch. The younger one came out and handed the rifle to the old man. Each of the men with Gray Owl was like he was, young and untested in battle. Each was anxious to prove his manhood the only way an Apache knew, in battle. Gray Owl knew they were anxious, but he was waiting on the sun to be directly behind him as it dipped below the hills. He saw the white man had a rifle by his side, but he also knew it was hard to be accurate with the sun in your eyes, no matter how good a shot you were. Gray Owl had a rifle, but only 2 of the men with him had one. The rest had bows. He and the 2 with rifles only had 7 bullets between them. But this problem would be solved soon. He knew the white men always had plenty of weapons and ammunition in their homes. He intended for all his men to have a rifle and bullets within the next few days from the white invaders he planned to kill. He again looked over his shoulder at the setting sun. It would be in the perfect spot to blind the white man in a few short minutes. At this distance, it was no disadvantage for an Apache to use a bow instead of a rifle. He was as accurate with it as he was with a rifle at 50 yards. He signaled his 4 best bowmen to crawl to him. They quickly lay on each side of him. At his signal, they would stand and release their arrows. As previously planned, the remaining braves made their way back down the hill and into a small creek bed that ran within 40 yards of the white man's corral, where 4 horses were stabled. They would rush the house from that side when the arrows were released from the top of the hill. It would be so easy. Gray Owl again glanced over his shoulder to check the position of the sun. He looked back down at the homestead and prepared to give the signal. Hesitating for a moment, he shut his eyes and thought about the vision he had last night. In the vision, his father's brother, Lone Wolf, and the fierce war chief Tanza appeared astride their prancing ponies. Fire appeared to be coming from the ponies' nostrils, and their eyes were as red as burning coals. Both men wore white breechcloths, white knee-high moccasins, and white bandanas atop their heads. They were bare-chested, and both had a single broad stripe of white paint across their faces. Their long raven-colored hair was blowing in the wind as lightning flashed and the thunder roared from a clear blue sky. Tanza stopped his horse, and looking straight at Gray Owl, raised both his hands above his head and looked up at the sky. The wind stopped, as did the lightning and thunder. It was suddenly very strange. An eerie silence fell across the land. Tanza lowered his arms to his side and slowly lowered his head until he was looking into Gray Owl's eyes. He began to speak to Gray Owl, and his words were clear, yet his lips were not moving. "Brother, it is your time. It is your time to rise up and lead your people against these invaders who are taking our land and herding